Good morning, everybody. My name is John Miller. I'm the Director of Marketing for Lead to Goals. Thanks for joining us. I've been excited to be bringing these presentations to all of you over the last few months. Glad you could join us for today's Influence and Persuasion webinar. As usual, our presenter is Scott DeLong. He's an entrepreneur and business owner. He has successfully built and exited 3 businesses. He's a lifelong learner. He's earned his master's degree in leadership development at 54 and later completed his Ph.D. in leadership studies. He's a strong passion for this content that he delivers, and looking forward to another successful webinar today. Please feel free during the presentation if you have any questions. We'll do our best to answer them in real time. Just go ahead and enter them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that as we go through the presentation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, Scott DeLong.
Good morning, everybody, at least on the West Coast. Those on the East Coast, good afternoon, I suppose. I'm really happy to be presenting to you again this week. The series is all about kind of exposure. We're not going to get into the level of detail where we're going to be able to fix existing problems, certainly, but the awareness is really what we work on in these 40-45-minute presentations. So please feel free to use the chat. I'm not going to see it. John will, and he'll formulate the questions and try to get those to us at the end. But use the chat bar anytime you want, and make sure that we know who you are. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. This one happens to be on influence and persuasion. And before we get there, I think being able to be influential is part of the leadership journey. And a leader that can't influence isn't going to be a leader for very long. That's for sure. So there's 3 contrasting leadership styles that will kind of frame this around. One is the great man theory, which is the 19th and 20th century version. Think John D. Rockefeller or Vanderbilt, or even George Patton, right? As the great man, somebody that is born to be a leader and therefore has that command presence. This tends to go with a command and control type of process, which is not really, in my mind, the best way to do management today. But the next one is the servant leadership, which is complete opposite of the great man theory. And the servant leadership was something done by Robert Greenleaf. And what Greenleaf talked about was you cannot lead unless you serve, and serving is leading. And allowing all of the voice from the room to be the guiding factor in most of everything we do. And then my personal favorite is the transformational leadership. Transformational leadership talks about idealized influence, and it talks about inspiring people. It talks about individual consideration, and then continuing learning. And so with continuing learning is really what we want to talk a lot about in our series and everything that we do here. The basic premise behind all of this, whether it's leadership or whether it's influence and persuasion, is the ability to be trusted, to develop trust among those that you are either trying to influence or trying to lead. It really doesn't matter. And there's a process that we call the circle of trust. And it's really a 4-part process, but it's more of a cycle. So if you think back to how you believe trust is developed, and it is, and that is the last premise here, which is deliver on the promise. If you do what you say you're going to do enough times, people will begin to trust you. The problem with that is that it takes a while to get that trust developed. There are those with a high propensity to trust that'll do it faster, and those that have a lower propensity to trust that'll take you longer to build that trust. So our process works through, is a process to develop trust, not only faster, but deeper. It starts with the concept of respect, respecting people, not the respect that we all learned growing up, which is respect is earned, it's not given. No, this is the respect that's given. This is the respect for basic human decency, the respect for you and your humanity. Start there, just start there. It's a great place. Everybody has something to say. Everyone has something of value. And the next part is the Stephen Covey concept of listening to understand as opposed to listening to reply. Rather than thinking about the response that you want to give, really try to get into the other person's mind, their psyche, and understand where they're really coming from. That is probably the single most important thing that you can do if you want to develop trust with folks. Listen to them. We all just want to be heard. The third concept in this cycle is sharing from experience, as opposed to telling people what to do. Taking the word should out of my vocabulary has helped me tremendously in this mind. I have no idea what people should do. I know what I might do. And if you want to hear some experience share around that, happy to do that for you. And then, of course, the last portion is delivering the promise. The fastest way to break trust is to not do what you say you're going to do. Make a commitment and not honor it. So anyway, this becomes an important part of influence and persuasion, because if people aren't going to trust you, you're not going to be able to influence them, and you're probably not going to be able to persuade them on anything that's important to you. So we talk about the sources of power, and there's really 6 of these. There's positional power and there's personal power. Each one are defined in 3 sections. Under the positional power, you have the coercive power, the power to just force people to do things because you have that sort of punishment available to you. There's reward power. I can pay you to do things that I want to do. I can incent you. I can motivate you with money and other types of rewards. So that's a source of power as well. And the last one is the legitimate power, meaning legitimate power in this scenario might be positional power within an organization. I'm the CEO, you're the vice president. I tell you to do this, you do that. What I find much more powerful is the personal power, the power that you can generate yourself through your knowledge, your understanding, and everything that is about you. There's informational power. Things that I know that you don't give me a source of power. You're going to want to hear what I have to say. There's expertise. That could be your resume. It could be your education. It could be your experience. It can be specific knowledge about a machine, whatever it might be. But your expertise gives you a power as well. And then the referent power. And referent power is who I know and who I can introduce you to potentially, right? Who are those surrounding me that you can gain access to through this referent power? That gives me a source of power. If you want to be around me because of who I know, that gives me a source of personal power. So this is an interesting slide, changing subjects a little bit. But one thing that we talk about in the workplace are the office politics and how negative they are. And they are. But my message to you all is that if you say, I am going to avoid all office politics, you may be harming your career. So let's think about the sources of office politics within this. And again, this is all just a framework before we get into the influence and persuasion to make sure that we have a good grasp on what we're talking about here. So avoiding office politics can hurt your career, as I mentioned. There's 6 types of office politician: the saboteur, the person that's trying to ruin your presentation, ruin your power, ruin all of that. The credit thief, you come up with an idea and your boss steals it from you. The gossip hound, people are telling stories about you. The flatterer, that's on the positive side, right? Someone's trying to get your attention by telling you how nice you look today and how wonderful presentation that you made, trying to get in your good graces in that way. The lobbyist, and that is the person that's always working angles. Think about the congressman working backroom deals before they even go to vote. And then the advisor. And the advisor office politics are really important. And I think this is a positive one, right? Well, working and finding a group, your group, whoever that might be, they might be peers, probably not subordinates, but maybe other people in power that you want to enlist in this office politic piece of seeking advice from them, and then others that will be seeking advice from you as well. So keep those things in mind. All right, quick commercial here. We have a podcast. Vince Moiso and I have something called the CEO podcast. And every week we come up with a new lesson or a new story. It's all about experience share. It's not about telling people what to do, how to do it, any of that. It's an experience share on leadership topics, on communications, building trust, all the things that we talk about in these series. So if you like this 40-minute format that we do, where we just kind of go high level, I'd like for you to sign up for the CEO podcast. I think John just put a link in the chat. If you want to click on that, takes you right to Apple, subscribe to that and listen to this stuff. It's free content. And if you like what you're hearing here, there's more of this every week and different perspectives. Every other week, we come up with a guest speaker as well. So there's 3 of us instead of just 2. And it kind of either solidifies some things that we're thinking about, or we challenge each other. It's kind of fun to listen to. It takes about a half an hour of your time. So if you're interested in podcasts, please see us at the CEO podcast. If you happen to go there right now with John's link, go ahead and put in the chat that you subscribed. I'd like to see who's willing to do that. So anyway, back to the story. 2 types of influence. The influence you can have with authority, which is, and when you should use it. Remember, those are the coercion, reward, and legitimate powers that you're going to be used there. And they are effective. You can influence people with your authority. There's also a downside of that, in that if people are only doing what you're asking them to do because they're complying with your thought process, because you're the boss, you have this source of power over them, then the most you're going to get is commitment or compliance out of those folks. What I'm looking for in a leadership role is to get commitment from the people that are working with me, not just compliance. So these sources of influence, the coercion, I can threaten to fire you, lay you out, whatever the situation, right? Reward, I can give you a bonus. I can give you extra time off. And then legitimate power is just because I'm the boss, I say so, and that's the way we're going to go do things, right? Those are true sources of influence. However, I don't think they're the most effective. There is a case, and we'll talk about this at the end. There is a case where the influence with authority is not only practical, it is needed, useful, and necessary. So go back to the great man theory that we talked a little bit about, and making people do things. There are times that you're going to want to do that. I'll just give you a hint right now. The 2 that I can think of are when time is of the essence, and we don't have time to get a group together and a committee together. A decision has to be made. It has to be made right now, and we need to get some action. And the other one is an emergency situation. Think about someone who is fallen down on the street and someone just yells, "Hey, someone called 911." Nobody ever does, right? But if I point at you and say, "You in the blue shirt, you dial 911. You over here in the yellow dress, can you come down here and help me with the CPR?" Things happen. And that's a perfectly legitimate use of having your influence. That's a legitimate power, influence, and that is the way to get things done. So in an emergency situation and when time is of the essence, go ahead and use that legitimate power. Other times, let's see if we can't work the personal power. In order to build that personal power, though, we're going to have to build our brand. Now, this is up to you. You decide who you want to be, what you want to be known for, and to develop the political skills to be that. Remember back when we talked earlier about the office politics, this is where that comes in. Those office politics are not all just negative. You can develop your personal skills, be known as the expert, be known as someone with go-to for information, being known as the person that knows others, your networking ability, right? And you need to develop it. It just doesn't happen on its own in a fast manner. I mean, it can happen on its own, but it won't happen as deeply and as quickly as you want it to unless you're actually working it. The key to all this is sincerity. And the word down here is apparent sincerity. And that doesn't mean fake sincerity. That means making sure that people recognize and see that the sincerity that's built within you, if you want to develop that brand, which will lead to personal power. So here we go in the influencing without authority. And this is really the meat of this topic. And it's all about the soft skills, right? So once you've gained that reputation, which ethos, right? So if you go to Aristotle, he talks about ethos, logos, and pathos. And it's 2,300 years old, yet it's still valid today dealing with rhetoric. Rhetoric is the ability to persuade others, right? Using language to persuade. And it takes usually, it doesn't always, usually takes a combination of these, the ethos, which is your personal brand. John attempted to do that for me at the beginning of this in the introduction, right? a little bit about my background to make sure that I had the credibility for this group in order for you to believe what I'm talking about is something that I know something about. So that's all ethos. The logos is the rational persuasion. Unfortunately, many of us start with that. We just go with the facts. Here are the things that you need to know. Fact A, fact B, fact C, fact D, and try to persuade somebody. The problem with just using logos is that people have alternate facts as well. Doesn't mean they're wrong facts. It means they have other facts that they're going to be put in there. And if you don't put those into your logical argument, there's not very strong a chance that you're going to be able to persuade somebody with just your facts. And here's the kicker here, and this is the emotional appeal of the pathos. And I know a guy, in fact, the guy I was talking about earlier, that Vince Moiso, who's on the podcast with me, strictly logical guy, right? He just wants to know, just give me the facts, right? And yet almost every time I try to persuade him into something, I talk about more about something he cares about than I do the facts behind that. For instance, if I wanted to get him to move and wanted to get him to shake and wanted to get him to do something else, I'd probably talk about his wife, his daughters, his mother. I mean, these are things of passion of his that I know, and how these sets of facts that I'm about to talk about will influence these folks as well, or how it will associate with them. So having a combination of ethos, which is your personal brand and your character, right? Are you believable? Have you built up that trust? Do you look as you're an expert? The rational persuasion, which is the logic, the argument that you're going to need to make sure that somebody wants to do what you're going to do. And then the emotional appeal, find something that's going to matter to the person that you are talking to, which comes up to maybe the most important of all of this. Anytime that you want to try to persuade somebody, understand who the audience is. Who are they and what matters to them? If I just start talking about the things that matter to me, I'm not going to be able to get Dino or Corey or John or Rec or Ryan or any of you to fall in love with my presentation. But if I knew something about the audience that is here, I would appeal to that group on an emotional level, or an individual. Appeal to them on an emotional level, you got a much better chance of getting the things that you want. The most powerful tool in all of this, I went back to that circle of trust process, to listen. Everyone thinks they listen well. Very few of us do. Most of us are listening to reply. We're listening to debate. We're listening to defend. We're listening to give somebody else an answer to what it is that they're trying to convince us to do. Why do I say that listening is more powerful? Well, think about this. So even if I'm in an argument, let's say John and I happen to be in an argument about something. If I just present my facts with my emotion, I'm not going to get very far unless, of course, I have that legitimate power or any of the reward and coercive powers. I can get what I want if I have a dominant position. But since I don't have a dominant position with him, first thing that I want to do is I want to take the emotion out of this. And the fastest way for me to get the emotion of John's emotion, because he's on the other side of this, is to actually listen to what he has to say. And then try to understand that from his perspective, not from mine, not from my debate. What you'll see with that is if you're truly listening to somebody and using all the listening techniques that you've heard about, right? Eye contact and mirroring and paraphrasing, and all those things are positive listening techniques. But there's one that I think is even more deeper than that, and that is to ask qualifying questions to what he's having to say. I try to pick out something that's important to him. And how do I know it's important to him? I look on the look on his face when he's talking about it. I can see the eyebrows raised, or I can see the grit in his teeth. I can see some sort of an emotional response as he's talking about a key word. And then if I ask a few questions about that key word, he knows I'm now listening to him and his answers. I'm not asking to provide information, although it does that for me. It certainly does. It provides me information that I can debate and discuss later. But what it does is it softens him, and it gets him to say, right? Just this sigh of relief that someone's hearing me. We all want to be heard. We all want to be heard, even those who are in conflict with, right? It's not just who can yell the loudest. In fact, I got a rule. First one to yell loses. And that's almost true. And hey, Lee, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. The first one to yell loses. Almost always true. So what we're trying to do in this persuasive argument, even discussion debate, right, is take their negative emotions out and see if we can't do that. And that's where I think the most powerful tool is to listen to people and to really dig deep into what they're trying to say and trying to understand from their point of view. So a couple charts here, and it's which source of power to use and what's going to work, right? So if we have positional power, I'm a mid-level manager, for instance. Do you think that's going to work with my boss? If I don't have anything I can coerce you with. Maybe I can threaten to quit, potentially, right? There's nothing I can really reward you with, and there's probably nothing that I have legitimate power with my boss. Up here, somebody that's equal to me in the organizational chart. The same story is true. I can't coerce, I can't reward, and I really don't have any legitimate power. Maybe I'm a team lead and that might give me some, and that's why the question mark's there. But with my subordinates, I can do it. I can coerce them, I can reward them, and I've got that legitimate power. So go ahead and use it if you've got it, right? If you think it is the right, the right technique to get long-term value out of what you need. So if you take a look at the personal power, across the board, it works with my boss, it works with my peers, and it works with my subordinates. By having information, expertise, and I don't know the right word for this, but the referent power, meaning sphere of influence among others, right? Where I can connect you. I've got a really good friend, and he may be on here today. I know he signed up, but that is the most powerful guy I know because of the people that he introduces to each other for no reason other than to make the connection. I mean, so anytime I need something now, I go to this guy. And when I need something from him, obviously he's got this source of power over me. So the referent power works really well in all these scenarios. So let's talk about a little bit about persuasion. So Robert Cialdi wrote the book maybe 20 years ago now, maybe more than that, and talks about the 6 conditions that persuade. And these are all still true. Reciprocation. So I do something for you, you do something for me. Works almost always. Not immediately all the time, but there's always that debtor sense when people are doing me favors that I'm going to owe them, I'm going to do something for them. So that is a great tool to be able to, and when I say tool, I want to be sure that you get my meaning. I don't think influence and persuasion should be used for evil or ill intent. Right? If that's your intent to be a bad guy, you can use these tools and use them against people. And it's just morally and ethically unsound. So be careful how you use these because they are really powerful. The law of commitment and consistency. What this talks about is that when we're going down a path, and you think about it in a telemarketing sense, they try to get you to say yes, right? Do you like the color blue? Yes. Do you like silk? Yes. Do you like blah, 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 and continue to go to yes. And then they finally come down to the answer that they're trying to get you to buy into. And the automatic response for most of us is, again, to stay consistent with what we've said and being consistent, right? And once we've made a commitment, we'll probably hold to it. Social proof is when others are doing something, that gives me some confidence that might be the right thing to do as well. If others are buying Teslas, then I might want to go out and buy a Tesla. For instance, even the CEO podcast, right? I asked you to place in the chat bar, and I haven't seen it yet. But for those of you that are doing it, the reason I did that is to get social proof. If 2 or 3 of you are doing it, then 3 or 4 might, then 4 or 5 might sign up as well. So that could be used as a technique, again, hopefully for good and not evil. But when we like to join the bandwagon It might not be the right way of saying that, but we like to make sure that others don't think we're crazy. I had a friend years ago. I was buying a lot of things on eBay. It was fun. I don't know. And a friend of mine called me and he said, I just bought this Tag Heuer watch on eBay and now I'm having second thoughts. I said, well, why is that? He said, well, no one else bid on it. Right. So the law of social proof worked in reverse for him then. He was getting buyer's remorse because nobody else seemed to want that watch that he bid on. And it works just the opposite. When you get into a bidding war on whether it's a home, whether it's on eBay, whether it's an auction, whatever else it is, just the fact that 3 or 4 people are bidding on it proves to me that there's some value in that. So I up my bid as well. So social proof is a big one. Having the authority is certainly a way. I can persuade you because I have the authority over you. And again, that goes into what I'm going to consider is the negative aspects of influence and persuasion. Scarcity, this is the big one. Today's the last day you can buy. Or you'll get this price if you do it now. The other people that are going to do it tomorrow aren't going to get this same price. So this is a rare coin is used sometimes as well. So the law of scarcity is also another way to use influence and persuasion. And then the last one, and here's the one that I find probably the most powerful, and that's liking, being likable, being somebody that somebody wants to be around. And therefore, you will be able to convince other people to do the things that you need them to do much more often than actually, I think, any of these other scenarios. How many of us like to buy from somebody, be persuaded by somebody that they don't like? Just being likable, it goes so far. So that's really the end of what we're going to be talking about on a high level. This has been part of kind of the summary of an 11-week course that we offer here for our corporate clients. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions on some of these things. We ran through them pretty quick. So please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. John will get those and ask those. But there's another offering that I want to make to folks, and that's if you're interested and you want like a free 15-minute needs analysis, one of our associates is put up his Calendarly, and you'll see that in the chat box if you take a look. And if you want to schedule 15 minutes with somebody here to talk about some of these things that we do, please feel free, and we'll get back to you based on the schedule that you set. So don't want to spend too much time working on that, but I did want to also let people know that next month is probably one of our favorite topics, and that's the deal with conflict and negotiation. I put these things together because almost all negotiations end up being in some sort of a conflict. You're trying to get the best deal, they're trying to make the most money, all those kind of things. So that's a source of conflict. And then we'll go into some negotiation techniques as well. There's a few more techniques that we talk about during this one. So if you want to sign up for our next live event, there's in the chat box there a link to, is there not, John, that you put up there?
Yeah, I've added it in there.
Or the way that you got to this one through LinkedIn, it's going to be up there all month. But we do these once a month. We run through them pretty quick, as you've noticed, because we don't want to take up too much of your time. But I think they're fun, and if they spark questions, that's what we're looking for. So right now is a good time for anybody to have any questions. If anyone did that, either just jump in and talk about it, or if you put it in the chat box, John will ask.
We got one just asking to. I got this sent to me here. Wonder if you could dive in a bit more on the different types you talked about with ethos and a few other ones earlier. Ethos is credibility, right? It is the person that establishing your credibility, whether that's through a resume, whether that's through an introduction, whether that's through however it's going to be doing that. I mean, I try not to do it myself because then it sounds self-serving and all that. However, there are certainly times where you're going to need to make sure that you've got some credibility with folks. So pathos is emotion. And I think probably the strongest of all of the influence and persuasion techniques is to dig in, got to know your audience, right? And to be able to use this and know what's going to
get them excited, or whatever emotion that you're looking for, right? And that is just using emotion as part of, not entire, but as part of your argument. And then the last one is the ethos, which is the, I'm sorry, the logos. We did ethos, pathos, and then logos. Logos is the logical argument, right? The reasons to make the change. So using logic to do that. And I think that in order to be truly effective, whether you're on stage, whether you're given a webinar like this, or whether you're just dealing with somebody one-on-one, using a combination of the three within your argument is stronger than not using the combination of the three.
I have another question, but before I get to that too, I wanted to make sure that we did talk about the course offering that we have beginning the week of April 11th. We're offering the 6-week version of Influence and Persuasion. I'll put a link in the chat box as well for that. There are 2 options. One starts Tuesday, April 12th at 2 p.m. And then the second session is Thursday, April 14th at 9 a.m. That'll run for 6 weeks. It'll be with Scott himself. And currently we're offering that course for the next 24 hours at $9.99 for the 6-week course.
Scarcity, right? Do it now or else. There you go. A little bit about the courses. We use a combination. We do adult learning theory here because that's who we're dealing with as adults, right? And one of the things that we like to do is, certainly there's going to be information share, things to read, things to try to understand. And then there's going to be a little bit of a lecture kind of a concept, but mostly what we like to do is the peer-to-peer learning concept within these groups. Now, this is something that we learned both in grad school and then with a group called Entrepreneur Organization. And the peer-to-peer learning tends to be the strongest. When we have 6-8 people in a group, and there are 6 and 8 different interpretations of that, and people have the opportunity to share what those are, it is amazing the amount of learning that happens within that. And then we'll also do exercises, and each week people will get exercises to do to help them cement what it is that they've learned, how they can apply it. We use something that's called a concept matrix. And this is really cool. You can do this anytime you read a book, right? Have you ever noticed when you read a book and someone says, what'd you get out of that book? And they come up with one item, right? They come up with one idea because that's what you asked them. What'd you get out of the book? What we like to do is do it chapter by chapter when we're reading a book, and a concept from each chapter. So now I have 11 or 12 things I've learned from that same book. So it's a very simple document. It is, what is the key point that the authors are trying to make? What did they mean by that key point? And the third piece is, how can I use that in my life? How can I apply it? Really a powerful tool. If you haven't used it yet, try it as you're reading your next book. At the end of a chapter, what did I get out of that chapter? What do you think the authors meant by it, and how can I use it? And you're going to get so much more out of reading just a simple book. It's a really cool tool. You said you had another question, John?
Yeah. The question is, they wanted to know if like where you find the most power, whether it's personal or professional, which one tends to yield the most results? Well,
I'm not the president of the United States, so I don't have the ultimate power just to tell everybody. Of course, he doesn't either. So I'm not the president of Russia. I don't have the ultimate authority just to tell everybody what to do or how to think, right? So I find personal power, and not just because it's, in my mind, the right way of going about it. Because very rarely am I looking for short-term decisions, an answer that's going to fix this right now. There's another really good book that I like to read and I like to suggest to people. It's called Crucial Conversations. And in that book, there's the authors talk about 3 questions that when you're getting in some kind of a conflict or debate about something, prior to entering that, ask yourself these 3 questions. What is it that I really want? What do I want for the other person or other parties, right? Whoever it might be. And the third one, which as I've aged, I found most important of all, what do I want for the relationship? If I can answer those three questions, the next thing that I'm going to do, is it going to impact those three things in the way that I want them impacted, right? I just thought that was so powerful. So do I want to use personal power or the positional power to demand and make people do things that they may or may not want to do? They're just doing it because I said so. Think about your parents when you were young, because I said so, right? And how well that works, as opposed to getting people to commit to the idea because whether you had knowledge, whether you had expertise, or whether you had referent power, and the way that you frame the persuasive argument, getting them to buy into that as opposed to just doing that. So personal power for me is much more important than professional power, or the positional power, except in one case. When a fire is going off in a theater, I want someone in charge, and I want them in charge right now. I don't want to debate and discuss about it. I want someone to tell me what to do in an emergency situation. Whether it's me or somebody else, somebody's got to take that. So if you got an emergency, go ahead and use that sort of power. But in all other cases, I think the personal power is so much more powerful because of the long-term effects on the relationships with the people that you're dealing with.
Great. We had another question from somebody here. It says, influence through personal branding, know, like, trust. In this age of digital commerce and direct access to people, can a startup or small business grow and scale without the CEO committing to personal branding and pitching to the customers, employees, or suppliers?
Yes. Yeah, your influence. Does it help if that's consistent with the organization's brand and the respect and response from those in leadership? And that, sure, it's much easier when you have that sort of support, but it's not impossible if you don't. I know a lot of people that are working their side hustles, right? They're building their own personal brand because they are tired of being part of an organization that is not consistent with their own values. And so they're exactly using that social media platform in order to build their personal brand, in order to someday then build their personal business or their ability to go get hired somewhere else as well. So the answer is yes. You don't need those above you to support you to get the things that you want to get, but it helps. Anybody else?
Feel free to just unmute and ask a question as well if you don't want to type it into the chat box.
Where do we go? Go ahead.
I posted it. I don't know if I put it in the right place in the chat box.
Go ahead.
So what I wanted to know is maybe like a life application specific to now. There's lots of people that are interviewing. Of course, we found you on LinkedIn. How would you suggest or give an example of applying this method to, say, negotiating a hybrid work schedule? So you really like the position, you like the company, but what I find a lot of discussion amongst candidates is I'm not really sure how to negotiate or how to have that conversation to make that hybrid model align with my work-life balance. So do you have an example of that?
Sure. The first thing that I would do is making sure that I understand the audience. So I think it was Goldman Sachs the other day that their CEO said, I want everybody in the office on such and such a date. We're all working from the office right now. Well, in that culture, it's going to be very difficult to negotiate a hybrid schedule, right? So knowing the audience and what is possible. However, I will tell you the backside of that story, and if it's not Goldman, I'll find out. But I think it's Goldman that said this. Only 50% of the employees showed up that day. So they're doing their own little strike, right? That just says, no, we're not doing that anymore. We don't need to. And so it's interesting. So the first part is to know your audience. Is that something that they're willing to consider? And if so, have I built up enough of the personal power? And this would be knowledge, I think, and expertise enough that they're going to want me, and that I can prove to them too, that not only can I do this job in a hybrid fashion, but I can do it better than I can by coming into the office every day, sitting in traffic for 2.5 hours, getting to and from work, and all of those things. So it would take some logical argument, certainly, to talk about how much more productive you could be sitting at your home office than you are on whatever freeway that you have to go to the office. So that would be part of the logical argument that you'd make there, I think. The resources that you have available to make sure that we can present the corporate image, because we're going to be on more Zoom calls if we're hybrid, right? So what does my background look like? How do I present myself? I'm not going to be showing up in pajamas, all of those kind of things. But without knowing whether or not the organization you're talking about is even willing to think about a hybrid position, it's really going to be really hard to make those arguments. So understanding your audience is step one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else come through, John? Anybody else want to unmute and talk?
No other questions at this time.
So please, I mean, if you like this sort of conversation, the CEO podcast is a great place to get free content. It really is. Vince and I do it because it's fun for us. I'm a little bit older than probably everyone on the call here, I'd say. But part of that, as you grow older, the whole giving back piece becomes important as well. So sharing of knowledge, sharing of information, sharing of things that have happened, sharing of things that I've screwed up on, right? All that comes out in this podcast. So if you got a half an hour once a week to listen to something, or watch it on YouTube is fine as well. It's really a great resource, and a great way to challenge some of your own thoughts, or give you some additional currency that support current thoughts that you have as well. So we'd love to have more listeners and getting more and more feedback on that. We do a lot of free things, whether it's the blog, whether it's the videos that we put out, whether it's the podcast, but we also are a for-profit organization as well. So if your organization has a need, 6 to 8 people in a group that want to learn something about what we talk about, mostly leadership, a lot about communications, and we can help people there as well. So please don't hesitate to schedule that 15 minutes with one of our folks, talk about what your needs are, and they can let you know where we might be able to help. Anybody else before we hang up? Well, I appreciate all your time. Thank you very much for showing up and giving us this 45 minutes or so of your time. Feel free to hit me up with emails and questions on the site as well. Too shy to ask here, go ahead and send us an email. Thank you very much.
Great presentation, Scott. Are you guys going to send out the slide deck?
We have
I'm just asking.
Yeah, we're recording this.
Oh, okay.
So great. That we will send out the link to get so that people that you can send it around to others and watch it again if you like. The actual slide deck, I don't think we have a plan to do that.
No, that's okay. The video is fine. That's fantastic, because I have short memory.
Yeah, me too.
I'm racing you to the end of the line, right? Okay, great. Thank you guys, both of you. Great. Thanks for answering that question on personal branding. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for participating with us. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot us an email. Bye.